Chapter 111. Dorian was watching Raon's training from the top of a tree. Wow! He initially wanted to stand guard to stop people from disturbing him, but he'd already forgotten that purpose and was just admiring him. Did he get even stronger? The sharp blade slashing through the air and the clean footwork pressing against the ground. The natural combination of the two showed that Raon's prowess had increased one stop further since they had left the training ground. How does this make sense? All Raon did was gamble to his heart's content, eating a lot of mint chocolate and stealing carelessly from others. Worries and nervousness had all been his job, yet Raon was the one whose swordsmanship had increased. Is he even using aura? It seemed Raon was getting serious as he gathered his aura. His energy was clearly shining red, just like sunlight. Gasp! Unable to repress his excitement, Dorian took his favorite round chips out of his belly pocket and took a bite. Whoosh! Raon stomped on the ground to perform the star connecting sword. Dorian already knew about those techniques, but they were all too powerful for him to block. Kring! All of a sudden, the red blade's trajectory changed fiercely. It was the fangs of insanity, the terrible swordsmanship that had ripped apart the minds and bodies of the 5th Training Grounds trainees. Whir! The sword's rotation changed once again. A crimson flower blossomed on the blade, flower petals fluttering like an autumn landscape. The storm of flame dominating the space made the hair on his neck stand on end. I can't block that. He'd been working hard to follow Raon, but he couldn't imagine himself blocking that flower petal. He was certain that Raon was getting stronger, even at that very moment. Ha! Dorian breathed out and shook his head. I want to ask him for help. If he came to his house to lend him his strength, he probably could achieve that. However, he was hesitant to talk to him about it. No, he actually couldn't. After all, he didn't decide to follow him for that purpose. I was just interested at first. He was confident despite the collaterals and the members of the direct line making fun of him, and the word give up didn't exist in his vocabulary. He had approached him because he was interested in that aspect of him. As he closely observed him, he realized Raon was the real deal. With his achievements and the boldness that no one had expected of him, he gained the acknowledgement of everyone, including direct line, collateral, vassal family, and recommended children. They were now separated, but every single one of the 42 trainees in the 5th training ground followed him wholeheartedly. He is really amazing. When Dorian put the second round chip in his mouth, Raon turned around. Are you just going to keep spectating? You knew I was here? You've been eating snacks right there. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Raon smiled wryly, looking at the round chip he was eating. Ugh! Dorian put the rest of the round chip in his mouth and ran to the open area. You should do it too. Sorry? It's been a long time since you swung your sword, so I'm telling you to exercise a little. I'm ALRI. Do it. Yes. Dorian nodded, drawing his sword. He performed the star connecting sword just like Raon did. Stretch your forearm a little more, bend your knee. Breathe about 25% slower. Yes. He fixed his posture according to Raon's advice. Whoosh. The wind rising from the sword was different. I'll be fine anywhere as long as I'm with him. He confirmed his conviction, the conviction that he could pass any trial as long as he was with Raon. Except for Haben Castle. Honestly, that was a bit scary. Actually, a lot. Raon finished his breakfast and went towards the Artisan Street, which was located in the very east. It was early in the morning, yet the heat from the blacksmiths was already spreading throughout the street. This reminds me of that time. The heat strong enough to make him sweat reminded him of the times he cultivated at Vulcan's charcoal kiln. Those were hard days. He almost died because of the ice filling up from inside and the heat from the outside. TSK, the King of Essence suffered even more. The heat seriously makes me gnash my teeth. Wrath kept blowing his breath, trying to push away the heat. He looked around the workshops with various weapons displayed, including swords, sabers, spears, and more. Those are pretty good. The swords were a pretty good balance between sturdiness, sharpness, and balance. They were the results of a competent blacksmith's passion and sweat. Pretty good? Are your eyes just peepholes? They can't even be used to trim the King of Essence's fingernails. They can't even be called weapons. Are your fingernails made of diamonds or something? Raon snickered, and went to the next blacksmith. He said they were pretty good, but he didn't say he was going to buy them. It was a fact that they weren't too bad, but the sword he was currently holding was actually better, so they weren't what he was looking for. Young master. Dorian, who returned after looking around the entire street, tilted his head while eating his snack. I couldn't find the workshop the prince mentioned. It wouldn't be around here. Greer had told him the day before that it was a place without a signboard between the alleys, not on the central street. Is it that way? There was a narrow alley that one person could barely pass through on the right side. Considering the heat that was coming from that way, it must have been the workshop Greer had mentioned. Clang! Clang! They entered the alley and a mountain-breaking hammering sound could be heard. The heat was also more intense. I came the right way. The hammering sound of steel already told him that it was on a different level from the other blacksmiths on the outer street. He looked at the weapons displayed in front of the blacksmiths. It seemed they weren't for sale since they were scattered around in a mess, completely disorganized. He tried holding the sword in front of him. It wasn't flashy or sophisticated. And yet, the blade was perfectly balanced and sturdy. The heaviness also felt like it would be able to endure any battle. This is more acceptable. Even though they would still break while trimming the King of Essence's toenails. He ignored Rat's trash talk and looked at the other swords. From the swords to the sabers, the spears to the daggers, everything was way better than the other place. Clang! 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 He looked inside the blacksmith. A white-haired old man was hammering on the steel, puffing up his muscles like a pot. He didn't stop his work despite having noticed the clients. Are all blacksmiths like that? Vulcan, who he met at the charcoal kiln, was exactly the same. It looked like competent blacksmiths didn't care about the people around them. Anyway, those are some good weapons for sure. The swords in that place were way better than the ones outside. It looked like he came to the right place. Excuse me? Dorian couldn't stand the boredom and called out to the blacksmith. You have clients. Dorian. Before he could stop him, the periodic hammering sound had stopped. Ahem. The blacksmith, who'd been leaning forward, stood up. He was tall enough to almost reach the ceiling, and his muscles were as bulky as an orc's. I'm not accepting customers. He turned around to glare at them with brown eyes. Now that he looked at him, he looked more like an ogre than an orc. Dorian made a monkey sound and started trembling upon meeting the old blacksmith's eyes. Leave. He shook his huge hand, expressing his disinterest in money and clients. Someone recommended that we come here. Recommended? The old blacksmith finally looked at Raon. Sir Greer recommended this place as a nice blacksmith. Greer? Greer. No way, do you mean the third prince? Yes. That sword-crazy guy recommended this place? There's no way he would, huh? The old blacksmith tilted his head after looking around Raon's body and arm. What are you? Pardon? How old are you? I'm 15. You are even younger than Greer. The old man's eyes widened, as if they were about to pop out. How do you have such an aura blade at 15? What the hell are you? What are you talking about? I can see a sword from you. It's not perfectly tempered yet, but it's a huge, sharp, and sturdy sword. Ah. Raon nodded, looking at the wavering old man's eyes. He was looking at the level of swordsmanship he had achieved. He was an outstanding person, deserving Greer's recommendation. How did you manage to temper such an aura blade at that age? I just trained hard. If one can achieve that level by just training hard, everyone in the world would have become an expert already. It's truly incomprehensible. Are you the next strongest swordsman of Owen or something? No, I'm not related to them. It's not Owen's sword, indeed. This pressure, is it Sieghart? Gasp. The response came from Dorian instead of Raon. His jaw dropped in surprise. That's how a proper blacksmith should be. They can tell someone's background just from looking at a swordsman. Back in Devilldom, there was a blacksmith like that. The King of Essence's sword has. Yes. Since he was already found out because of Dorian, Raon nodded and ignored Rath's story about Devilldom. So you were a Sieghart after all. He laughed and stepped back. The Conqueror of the North has been raising a monster. I've witnessed countless swordsmen, yet it's my first time seeing somebody like you. My name is Raon. He deserved the courtesy since he was able to analyze his strength just from looking at him. Raon introduced himself by revealing his name. I'm Kuberad. Just an old man that has no choice but to wield his hammer. Ah. Raon swallowed. Kuberad Jayton. He was one of the blacksmiths of the continent alongside Vulcan. He was a monstrous blacksmith that had created countless masterpieces between Owen and Bakker. Why are you in such a place? The fact that the great blacksmith was living in such a deserted alleyway was as surprising as the fact that Vulcan had been making charcoal for over 10 years after his retirement. It's just my hobby, since I've already accomplished what I wanted. He gestured for them to come inside. How about me? What do you think about me? Dorian came next to him and pointed at himself. What are you talking about? Can you also see the aura blade or whatever from me? Round face, round eyes, a bloated face. You must be a coward. Eek. Dorian faltered, since he hit right on the mark. Is that old man a fortune teller with a sharp intuition? I know, right? Noticing his aura blade was one thing, but he didn't expect him to recognize that Dorian was a coward. I want to show him the King of Essence's majestic face. I'm sure he will kneel and start worshipping me immediately. What a joke. Raon sneered. He was sure he would immediately say that he was a psychopath as soon as he saw Rath's white face. You bastard. The King of Essence's true face isn't this lump of ice. It's a flower. A literal flower. The most handsome in Devilldom. Ah, I see. Raon ignored Rath's scream and looked at Kuberad. So, why did you come to visit me? We are looking for a sword. Sword? Since we are heading to a tough battlefield, we came to find a sturdy and sharp sword. Do you want me to make you a sword? No, that's not the case. I'm not a swordsman yet, and there's somebody who promised to make my first sword. Ha? Kuberad stopped moving. Did you just say you aren't officially a swordsman yet? Yes. What kind of life have you been living? How can you have such prowess as a trainee? Murmuring that it was ridiculous, he sat down on the wooden box. You are a real monster, one that I haven't seen for a long time. Wait, is Vulcan the person that is going to make you a sword? I guessed right. I heard he'd retired, but he's back. Ha 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 ha. Taking his smile as a yes, Kuberad burst into laughter. He seemed to be related to Vulcan somehow, since it was his honest expression of joy. Of course. I shouldn't snatch away the swordsman that Vulcan set his eyes on. He smiled visibly, to the point that his mustaches were raised, and opened his hands. Take whatever you like. Nothing here has been made sloppily, so it will be useful no matter what you take. Thank you. It's nothing. My sword should be honored instead to be used by a boy that might become the continent's strongest in the future. Kuberad started drinking the liquor on the table from the bottle. See, can I also pick one? Yes. I'm in a good mood, so I'll give you one too, coward. Ugh. Dorian pouted. However, he didn't say anything about it as he checked the swords with his eyes shining red. Raon checked the scattered swords one by one. They are on a different level. Even though they look like they were made half-heartedly, they were higher than the rare rating by far. It seemed that he would be satisfied with any of them. Then which? As he was checking a slightly long sword, he could hear a strange sound from the left side. It sounded like wailing. Buzz, buzz, He wasn't mistaken. He put down the sword and turned his head. Ha! There was a weird dagger between the swords. A dagger with red sheath and hilt was resounding on its own. Chapter 112. Kuberad smiled vividly, looking at Raon's back as he looked through the swords. The world doesn't stay stagnant. He'd met countless warriors as a blacksmith, from young geniuses to absolute beings that established their houses to stand at the center of the world. Every single one of them had left him an unforgettable impression, but the boy standing in front of him was different. It's not about his strength. The prowess he possessed despite being 15 years old was certainly amazing, but that could have already happened before in the vast continent. However, his qualities were different. Like a blacksmith that forges a sword by hammering the steel, he was sharpening his sword by polishing his mind. It was an auspicious temperament that could achieve the unification of sword and body in a near future, and the mind's sword later on. That's only possible after becoming a master. Raon's prowess was about the level of an expert. He couldn't understand how his mind had solely reached that level through countless walls. The name of Sieghart is going to resound throughout the world once again. Kuberad murmured that he wanted to see that interesting world and guzzled down the bottle. The cheap liquor tasted sweet thanks to his interesting client. Whir! Upon hearing the sudden sound of vibration, he put down the bottle and raised his head. Ha! The red dagger on the table was wailing, and Raon was extending his hand towards it. Wait. He must not touch that. He couldn't understand why the dagger he'd left out in a corner was there. Stop! He shouted in a hurry, but the red dagger was already in Raon's grasp. Damn it! Ugh! Kuberad suddenly stood up and took Dorian, who was standing there dumbfounded, and stepped back. Why are you doing this? I wasn't trying to pick two, I really was trying to pick one. Do you see that? Ha! What's that dagger? Why is such energy? Dorian swallowed. A weird red light was simmering up from the dagger Raon was holding. It's a possessed blade. Possessed blade? Possessed blades were grotesque and cunning blades. They were evil items, ones with negative emotions that tried to control their wielders. Damn it! Kuberad bit his lip. Since the one holding the sword was just a boy whose mind wasn't yet matured, he would definitely easily succumb to the sword's ghastly energy. We have to stop him before the ghastly energy reaches his head. Coward, draw your sword. He took up the hammer next to him and urged Dorian on. However, he just tilted his head without drawing his sword. What are you doing? It's going to be dangerous if we don't stop him, no. No, but we don't really stop him. The young master is the same as always. What? The ghastly energy is leaking all around, huh? Kuberad's jaw dropped. It was true that the ghastly energy was overflowing, since it was coming out fiercely. However, the ghastly energy was only spreading out around the dagger, not managing to even get close to Raon. Clying. The possessed blade wailed once again. Unlike the strange vibration from before, it sounded more like a dog's scream upon getting caught on a leash. Hey, are you okay? Raon, who'd been looking at the dagger, raised his head upon hearing that. He didn't look bewitched by the ghastly energy, as his clear red eyes looked perfectly fine. I'm okay. But this dagger isn't just an average weapon. Huh? Kuberad gasped and fell back. What the hell are you? How dare? Wrath's serious voice was frighteningly dry. An inferior bug target, the King of Essence's possessed body. His wrath was coming from the bottom of his heart. The blue coldness boiled up and mercilessly suppressed the dagger's ghastly energy. Clying. The dagger screamed, squashed by Wrath's coldness. I'm going to shatter you into pieces. Wrath sliced his coldness into thin threads and inserted them into the dagger. It seemed he was trying to kill the dagger itself. Stop. What? Stop there for now. Why? It was trying to snatch food from the King of Essence. You'd have been swallowed by the dagger's ghastly energy if it wasn't for the King of Essence. I'm not your food, and I wouldn't be swallowed by a dagger like this even if you weren't around. You are underestimating the ghastly energy. It's true that the level of it doesn't even compare to the edge of the King of Essence's toe, but for a mere human. You didn't even manage to pierce through my defense, so do you really think something like this could manage it? Wrath's anger stopped at once. He was just staying there, speechless, with his mouth wide open. Am I right? So just leave it alone. That seriously hurts. You won't be able to die a peaceful death. The King of Essence will chew you up and gnaw on you for over thousands of years. What is this dagger? Please listen to me. Raon ignored Wrath, who started talking, and went to Kuberad. That is. Kuberad looked back and forth between the dagger and Raon with a dumbfounded gaze, then sighed. It's a failure I created. It's a possessed blade, just like I said earlier. Possessed blade, I can indeed feel the ghastly energy from it. You shouldn't just be able to feel it. It should be trying to swallow you right now. It was manageable. Raon was just stating the truth, but Kuberad groaned dejectedly, unable to understand the situation. Possessed blades are blades with ghastly energy. In simple terms, they are blades that are made with the inclusion of people's negative emotions. Inside that blade is. Kuberad bit his lip and continued. Resentment. And it's a terribly viscous resentment. Can you explain it to me? Sit down. Kuberad pointed at the chair in front of the table. Raon nodded and sat down. Is it okay if I listen as well? Dorian took a soft chair from his belly pocket and leaned his body on it. There's a small village called Siren in the south. The villagers were good people that treated a tree called Othello as a sacred tree. Raon knew about the village. It was a small village slightly outside House Robert's domain. Since the villagers had a good nature without much suspicion, he'd used it as an escape route before. The White Blood Religion's believers assaulted that village. White Blood Religion. Raon narrowed his eyes. Those atrocious bastards. The White Blood Religion was a huge religious group belonging to the Five Demons alongside Eden and the South-North Union. They were fanatics that assaulted everything in the world due to their first doctrine, aiming to cover the world with white blood. Then, Siren Village. There were no survivors. Half the villagers died right there, and the other half were abducted and taken away. They even cut down and took away the Othello tree, which was the villagers' spirit. White blood was the only thing that remained. White blood wet the earth instead of red after White Blood Religion's assault. It was part of their magic. I made that blade using a meteorite piece I had back then and the branch of Othello that remained in that place. Kuberad looked at the blade Raon was holding with wavering eyes. You made a blade? Yes. I was planning to offer them comfort with that blade instead of a memorial. However, Kuberad touched his temple and frowned upon remembering that time. The white blade and hilt was dyed in red as soon as I completed it. Contrary to my intentions, it incorporated an uncontrollable amount of resentment from the Siren villagers. I see. Raon nodded. Just as he said, the sword contained a tremendous amount of ghastly energy. If someone else had held it, they would have been bewitched by and started swinging it around. There's a saying that good people are scarier when they get angry, but I didn't expect it to be this much. Even powerful people couldn't manage the ghastly power, so I had no choice but to keep it with me. I don't understand how you are able to grab it without any problems. He drew the dagger from the sheath to look at it. The blade was completely dyed in red, just like the sheath and hilt, as if it was trying to remember the resentment from that day. Whir! The red blade vibrated to spread its ghastly energy. The energy crawling on his hand was even more terrifying and evil than when it was contained inside the sheath. Clang! Raon used the ring of fire. The 5 rings rotating around his heart resonated with each other to increase his level as an existence. Cleeing. Just like when it was pushed back by Wrath, it started screaming upon being suppressed by his level. Ha! Seriously. Kuberad's eyes wavered like a ship on rippling waters. He is like an onion. He thought he'd witnessed enough about him, yet he was showing another side of himself. He couldn't believe that he was just a child that wasn't qualified as a swordsman yet. The sword I forged to comfort their soul is craving revenge. That's why I can't use it as a memorial. I was trying to seal it, but I didn't expect this to happen. Didn't you mention earlier that half of them have been abducted? Yes. The white blood religion usually kills half on the spot and abducts the other half. I only found half of the villagers as corpses. Raon closed his eyes after looking at the dagger as it wailed in mortification. He was abducted by Robert's people during his childhood in his previous life, a childhood that he couldn't even remember anymore. Since they weren't just abducted but also slaughtered, their resentment must have been even worse than his own. Whir. It felt like the dagger's weeping vibration was scraping at his heart with rough glass. Raon opened his eyes once again and stared at the dagger. Have a lot of things to do. I already don't have enough time to take care of it, so I can't really help with your revenge. However, if I ever encounter the white blood religion, I'll make your wish come true. The dagger's weeping sound started to subside in silence. Are you willing to come with me? The dagger stopped crying. It seemed as if it was pondering about it as its blade trembled. Whir. The biggest vibration so far resonated from the dagger. Ghastly energy was also flowing out, but it wasn't harmful anymore. Clang. It resonated with the rotating ring of fire, producing the clear resonance of a sword. Sword's resonance? Kuberad fell back from his chair upon hearing the sword's resonance from the dagger Raon was holding. I choose this one. Raon smiled broadly and put the dagger in its sheath. Are you really taking that? Am I not able to? Ha! It's the first time someone confidently told me he's taking a legendary weapon. Despite what he was saying, Kuberad was making a satisfied and refreshed expression. What did you just say? Did you say you are taking that cunning thing? Yes. It's a parasite. How are you planning to keep a parasite with you, one that's targeting the King of Essence's belongings? Are you out of your mind? A parasite, huh? Raon gave Wrath a sour look. What? Why are you looking at the King of Essence with that impertinent gaze? I figured there wouldn't be any difference between having one or two parasites. T2 parasites? No way. Are you referring to the King of Essence? Well, it's true. You are targeting my body, just like the dagger. Dagger. You're crazy. The King of Essence is the monarch of wrath that dominated the entire northern region of Devildom. No, it doesn't matter whether you are a monarch or whatever. It's a fact that you are currently sticking to me because you failed at taking over my body. Stick? The King of Essence, ugh. Raon Zighart. You can't say wherever you want with that hole in your mouth. This is the first time in my entire life I've been humiliated so much. But I'm talking because I have a hole. Raon decided to ignore Wrath, who was exploding in anger, and turned his head towards Kuberad. What is the name of this dagger? I didn't give it a name, since I made it use as a memorial. Then is it okay if I name it? Do you have an idea? Since the blacksmith wanted to comfort the villagers, Requiem. I want to name it the Blade of Requiem. A blade of Requiem spreading ghastly energy, huh? That's rather enigmatic. He snickered and stood up. Take it. However, you must keep your word. Of course. I'll keep clashing against the 5 demons as long as I wield Zighart's name. Wow, a possessed blade. You really obtained a possessed blade. Dorian was eating snacks, spectating them through some strange glasses. Thank you. Raon equipped the Blade of Requiem on his lower back and bowed at Kuberad. What are you doing? Pardon? You should pick your sword. But I told you I'll give you a sword, not a dagger. Ah. It seemed he was intending to give him another sword. Are you really giving me a sword in addition? Just don't lose. That's everything a blacksmith wants from a swordsman. Kuberad handed over the sword Raon had been looking at earlier. I'll visit Zighart later to meet Vulcan, so don't give me a cold reception. Of course. My family is great at cooking, I'll make sure to treat you well. I'll look forward to it. I won't forget this favor. Thank you. It's nothing special. Their smiles were as warm as sunlight shining between the alleys. Well then. Raon bowed, then left the blacksmith. As he was about to leave the alley, Dorian's voice could be heard from inside. I haven't finished choosing yet. Chapter 113. Chapter 113. You are so mean. Dorian started steaming from his nose. How could you forget about me? Sorry, it was the perfect time to say goodbye. I just forgot about you. Arg, was my presence that small? Dorian's shoulders drooped. But you got a nice sword. Isn't that enough? Raon pointed to the second sword hanging around Dorian's waist. He'd managed to get one of Kubarad's swords before leaving the workshop. Well, that's true. But... By the way we are both carrying multiple swords looks rather tasteless. Raon was currently equipping the Sieghart's supplied sword, Kubarad's sword, and the Blade of Requiem. Dorian also had 2 swords at his waist. They could look like they were just trying to look cool on the outside. Oomph, you did realize it. Weaklings usually like to hang around with a bunch of weapons. Back in Devildom, the King of Essence conquered a region with his bare fists. Wrath was still spreading coldness around him, angry about Raon treating him like a parasite earlier. Since he was starting to go on another long-winded rant, Raon ignored him. Isn't it fine? It looks cool since we look like we're dual wielders. Ha? As they were about to leave through Camelun's main gate, they encountered a Knight Order wearing silver armor. With a lion emblem engraved in their chest, they were Owen's Knight Order. Oh. We met here again. The blond man standing at the front of the Knight Order cheerfully waved his hand. He was Owen's third prince, Greer det Owen. Indeed. Raon took the hand Greer had extended with a smile. I managed to get a nice sword, thanks to you. Thank you. Thank you, too. Dorian twisted at the waist in order to show him the sword he just got. It looks like you managed to get some nice swords. The prince found it funny as he made a soft smile. Yes, I'm satisfied with the sword I got. I didn't expect someone like him to be around here. I know. He insisted on settling there even though I tried stopping him by pulling on his pants. He murmured that it was such a shame, looking at the sword hanging around Raon's waist. By the way, it went according to my expectations. What? He isn't the type of person that would give someone a sword just because of my recommendation. He must have given you a sword because he took a liking to you. You know, blacksmiths are very prideful. Greer wriggled his fingers, telling him that he was really amazing and worthy of his acknowledgement. It looked like he was itching for a rematch. Where are you headed? I'm going north for now. Then how about accompanying us? We also need to head north for a day. He pointed at the knights behind him. Raon couldn't recognize any of them except for Seaton, who ended his match in a draw against Bayan last time. All right. Since he didn't need to make a detour, it didn't really matter. Also, he'd received the Blade of Requiem thanks to Greer, so he wanted to tell him about its story. That's great. Our travels won't be boring. Your Highness. The red-haired knight that had been watching from behind stepped up next to Greer. We are in the middle of a mission. We shouldn't recklessly gain new companions. This guy is Raon. Raon Sighart. There are only benefits to having him with us. Raon? The knight's gazes changed upon hearing the name Raon Sighart. They scanned his entire body like reptiles checking their prey. Raon nonchalantly accepted their gazes. The knights were unable to discover his prowess with their current abilities. They would probably see him as being at the highest level sword user at best. On the other hand, Raon had already analyzed their abilities. Greer was at the highest level of sword user, and the other knights were beginner to intermediate experts. He noticed disappointment in the knight's eyes. I knew it. The knights didn't manage to discover his true prowess and were thinking he was worse than what they had heard. They are judging from what they see, and can't even hide their expressions. They are a disgrace of knights. They're still young. I'm sure they will change as they gain more experience. You aren't just young. You're a kid. I'm a different case. Do you think you're special? Special is a title belonging to existences like the King of Essence. I'm a noble and elegant absolute being that was born as one. Ha! Apparently, he really needed to brag about himself in any situation. He couldn't help but sigh upon hearing it. Let's go. Can you tell me about how you got the sword from him? I kept thinking about it after sending you. Greer gestured for him to follow with his hand. Raon snickered and tapped Dorian's shoulder. Let's go. Only high nobles, royalty, and celebrities were allowed inside the VIP room on the 4th basement level of the black market. Inside that room, a proud woman wearing a black dress was sitting under the dim light with her legs crossed. She was the Princess of Bakr, Jaina. As she was tapping on the table in boredom, the door opened and a woman with narrow eyes and long purple hair flowing down to her waist entered. Sorry for the wait. This much is nothing in order to meet Lady Orienne, the Black Cloud's authority. Black Cloud was an intelligence organization branching across the continent. Their excellent intelligence capabilities had led to people saying that whatever they don't know is unknown to the gods. I'm not the authority at all. The woman named Orienne narrowed her eyes further and shook her head. She stuck out her chin slightly and continued. I'll tell you the information you've requested. Shall I tell you directly? Or do you prefer documents? Please, tell me. All right. The woman named Orienne nodded and straightened her shoulders. A member of the direct line named Raon Sieghart doesn't exist in the world. What? Jaina reacted in surprise. In other words, no one in Sieghart's direct line is named Raon. But that doesn't make any sense. Sorry? Are you sure the information is correct? She even forgot her formalities as a princess. It is correct. Orienne calmly blinked her eyes. There's not much information because Sieghart is an extremely closed group, but we at least know the names and faces of their direct line, upper collaterals, and vassal families. A member of the direct line by the name of Raon does not exist in Sieghart. That can't be true. It doesn't make any sense. Jaina slammed the table with her fist and stood up. Was I possessed by a ghost? Raon's dominant pressure was befitting Sieghart's direct line, and he was also acquainted with Greer, Owen's third prince. What is going on? There was no way Greer had lied, since he'd been blabbering about Raon as Sieghart's rising star, a sword genius and the future head of house even before she met Raon. Then he must be a member of the direct line. He also said he was a direct line. Wait. Jaina swallowed. No, he didn't. Now that I think about it, neither of them mentioned that he was a member of the direct line. The circumstances had made her believe that, but none of them had actually said he was a member of the direct line. She was speechless and just laughed wryly. Damn it! He was a collateral. That was the only way to explain the strange situation. Ha! She was running out of breath, realizing she had bowed to a mere collateral and apologized. She wanted to catch him immediately and make him kneel. Jaina ground her teeth and glared at Orienne as she stood in front of her. That was the Black Cloud's flaw. Their response was only limited to the question she asked, despite knowing that Raon was a collateral. I'll ask one more thing. That will add to the cost. It's okay. Orienne opened her hand, gesturing to her to ask. Information about the collateral named Raon in Sieghart. He is 15 years old. He is a collateral, just as you said, and is currently the representative of Sieghart's 5th Training Grounds trainees. He won the spar against Greer de Owen, Owen Kingdom's 3rd prince, and he has subjugated the Snow Tiger bandits that were about to join the South-North Union. And? She told her about a few more details, but nothing concerning Eden came from her mouth. Ha! Jaina listened to the end with a red face before standing up. She took out a gold pouch from her chest and threw it on the table with a cold smile. You are really excellent with business. Thank you. Orienne smiled, pretending that her sarcasm was a compliment. Poof. Jaina left the room and slammed the door. She-ite. Her angry voice could be heard from afar. Sieghart's collateral played Bakr's princess for a fool. Isn't that interesting? Orion flicked her finger and the black shadow under the lighting wavered. Gather information about Raon Zighart. Her red lips smoothly curved into a crescent moon. I think he is a real deal, one I haven't seen for a long time. At the low hill about 1 day away from Kyangi. Raon, Greer and Dorian were sitting in front of a bonfire that worked to melt the cold night wind. Since the knights left to scout, Raon figured it was his opportunity and told Greer about the possessed blade. Although he only said the first sentence, and Dorian blabbered the rest. I really couldn't believe it even though I saw it with my own eyes. The red ghastly energy came out from the sword and started spreading like octopus tentacles. Oh, that's amazing. You should have seen it. Both the blacksmith and I fell back in surprise. I had only ever heard about possessed blades before. Ha! Raon shook his head. It was bullshit, since Dorian was just eating his snacks back then. And when the young master said, "Come with me," the sword resonated with a clang. It was like a scene from a painting. Wow! Greer exclaimed with shining eyes. He was seriously more suitable to knighthood or heroics than being a prince. That was an amazing experience. I'm jealous. Greer's eyes shone as he looked at the blade of Requiem hanging from Raon's waist. However, he didn't recklessly ask him to show it to him. He certainly knew his manners. But that's also a sad story, since the white blood religion's evil deeds are spreading throughout the continent. Indeed. Raon nodded. A religious group had the characteristic of spreading quickly, and their believers existed almost everywhere. Actually, our mission is also related to the white blood religion. Greer tapped the sword with the lion emblem. Is it? We are transporting something from the white blood religion's branch to the kingdom. That's why there are so many knights. Wait a moment. Raon stopped Greer from talking and stood up. He could feel dozens of presences approaching from afar. What's up? Someone is coming this way. Aren't they the knights? Dorian's eyes trembled like a pendulum, already terrified from what he said. The number is different, and the knights are also coming back after noticing the presence. Your Highness, prepare yourself. Okay. Greer immediately equipped his helmet and stood up, trusting him completely. Your Highness. We are in trouble. The white blood religion, The knights returned a moment later and saw Raon and the prince. Since they were already ready to fight, their eyes widened. Ha! Were you already aware of their surprise attack? The swordsman Raon told me about it. Is the white blood religion coming? Ah, yes. The knights looked at Raon with bamboozled faces. They were curious about how he had learned of it. There are at least 50 fanatics, 5 priests, and 1 bishop. Listening to the dreary sound of the entire forest moving, Greer grabbed his sword. Everyone, prepare for battle. Prepare for battle. With a war cry, the knights stood in front of the prince to protect him. I'm sorry about this. I wouldn't have asked you to come along if I knew this would happen. Greer sighed, turning around to look at Raon and Dorian. I didn't expect them to assault us within Kyangi and Owen's influence. It's fine. Raon shook his head, and stood on the same line as the knights. I guess they are targeting the object. The prince said he was transporting something from the wild blood religion. Their target must have been that something. Sue. Along with strange footsteps, the white blood fanatics wearing jet black coats from head to toe exited the forest. Some of them had 1 or 2 white lines on their black coats. They were the priests and a bishop. Raon could feel they possessed a higher prowess than the rest. They're really here. Dorian started screaming at the white blood religion's appearance. His teeth were trembling, but he somehow managed to hold the line. Ha! Raon exhaled lightly and grabbed the sword he'd recently acquired. I didn't expect to keep my promise this early. As he was about to draw the sword, thinking it was such a mysterious thing to happen. Whir! The blade of Requiem vibrated loudly enough to resonate throughout the entire hill. Are you telling me to draw you? The vibration grew even more intense, as if an answer. So it wants to take revenge with its own power. Raon nodded. He also had no intention of leaving his revenge against Darius Robert to someone else. He drew the blade of Requiem, thinking they were like-minded. Crackle! Ghastly, resentful energy was burning on the red blade, which looked like it was soaked in blood. Chapter 114. Raon had encountered 4 of the 5 demons in his previous life. If he were to choose which of them were the hardest ones to fight against, the white blood religion was always in the top 2. They were a group of fanatics that didn't hesitate to pierce the stomach and slash the throats of their allies for their religious purpose. Kill them all. The bishop wearing a coat with 2 white lines extended his hand, and the white blood fanatics started running at them with bloodthirsty eyes. Well, then. Raon held the blade of Requiem in a reverse grip and gathered the energy from the 10,000 flower cultivation. Let's take your revenge. With fierce steps, Raon dashed at the white blood fanatics. Clang! The white blood religion believer at the front drew a sword curved like a crescent moon. It was the white blood religion's main weapon, a scimitar. He slashed the scimitar at Raon's neck without even shouting. I knew it. The white blood religion believed that killing in a single strike was a mercy, and usually aimed for the neck or the heart. The attack was extremely lethal, but it was easier to dodge because of that. Raon bent his knees. He dodged the scimitar with a paper-thin difference, then slashed with the blade of Requiem. Thud! The white blood fanatic's head fell on the ground, following the hand's light movement and drawing an arc. Ha! Raon exclaimed, looking at the blade of Requiem. What just happened? It was just a simple and light cut, yet the opponent's head was cut off. It was an unreasonable degree of sharpness. I feel like I'll get cut just from holding it. He licked his lips, looking at the ghastly energy spreading out like the roots of a 1,000-year-old tree. Let's continue. The blade of Requiem resonated in response. Thud! Raon kicked the ground. He pierced into the white blood fanatics attacking the knights, slashing with the blade of Requiem. Spurt! Along with a frightening sound, the bodies of five white blood fanatics had been split diagonally. Whir! The blade of Requiem resonated even more intensely, craving for more blood, and the wave of ghastly energy also became stronger. Raon's red eyes sparkled. He dashed into the battlefield, leaving his body to the ghastly energy and started slaughtering the white blood fanatics. He looked like a red wolf taking a stroll amidst a flock of sheep. Stop! Once he killed 20 white blood fanatics on his own, a man with a white line on his coat stood up to him. He was a priest, a higher rank of believer. Whir! The scimitar the priest was holding started shining in white. Die! The priest came running at him, aiming for his neck. It's too obvious. His attack was no different from the believer's. Raon extended his left foot to the back. He thrust the blade of Requiem the moment the scimitar hit the ground. Poof! It was just a simple thrust, yet the left side of the priest's chest exploded. It was a ridiculous amount of power. It's crazy. The blade of Requiem was still craving its revenge. Its dry resonance sounded like the priest's blood wasn't enough to satisfy its thirst. Raon narrowed his eyes, looking at the priest's blood seeping into the ground. That's a weird color for blood. Mixing in some water would have that light color. Wrath was right. The priest's blood was light red, similar to red paint with a small amount of white mixed in. This is the white blood religion's characteristic. The white blood fanatics used a cultivation technique called bloody banquet to gather bloody energy, then enhanced it by drinking human blood. Their blood grew white the more they drank blood and the more they cultivated. In other words, how close to white a white blood fanatic's blood was determined their position and power. They really are crazy. Yes, they can't even be called humans. Raon kicked the ground, seeing that the knights were struggling against the white blood fanatics. He assaulted the priest that was hacking his scimitar at the red-haired knight's neck. The priest reacted quickly and turned his body, but it was already too late. Wham! The blade of Requiem's sharp strike sent the priest's arm flying. Kua! Why, you bastard! Raon didn't miss the opportunity as the priest stepped backwards in panic. He followed up immediately to behead him. Huff. Hearing the desperate breath, Raon looked sideways. The red-haired knight that barely managed to survive was staring at him in astonishment. Raon nodded slightly and advanced. Each time he swung the blade of Requiem, one or two white blood fanatics disappeared. A tremendous amount of murderous intent endlessly stormed around the red blade. I have no other choice. The bishop, who had been overpowering the prince and two knights on his own, turned around. He used a strange footwork, making him look like a moving shadow, to step in front of Raon. I'll kill you first. Can you do it? Raon sneered. He could feel that the bishop was stronger than the green war demon or Radon, but he couldn't imagine losing it all. I'll show you. The bloody scimitar drew a half-moon towards his neck. Whoosh! He leisurely bent his back and the scimitar cut his golden hair, scattering it in the air. He is the same. The bishop wasn't an exception to the white blood religion's way of targeting the neck and heart. As Raon straightened his back, the bishop opened his left hand, which wasn't holding the sword, shooting snow-white energy from his index finger towards Raon's heart. It was a technique called Bloody Finger Bullet, which consisted of shooting aura from the finger's mana circuit. I knew it. Raon slashed the blade of Requiem down. The bloody finger bullet was cut in half by the fierce ghastly energy, destroying the rock behind him. As the bishop pulled his arm back, Raon pierced into his space, swinging the blade of Requiem at the scimitar coming down at him. Clang! The enchanted scimitar and the blade of Requiem, surrounded by ghastly energy, clashed and produced a thunderous noise similar to a devil's scream on the hill. Creak! The ghastly energy of the blade of Requiem glowed darkly. It became a red ray of light to bounce off the scimitar. The bishop's expression grew stiff, irritated by the fact that he was pushed back by a small dagger. Who are you, and where are you from? I'm sorry, but I can't reveal my identity myself. I'll be the one to drink your blood. The bishop opened his left hand and put it on his waist, then held up his scimitar. With an intense pressure emanating from his posture, he was aiming for an all-out attack. Bring it on! Raon bent his knees and narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to use a secret dagger technique, ghastly energy started emerging from the blade of Requiem. Whir! The ghastly energy spread out along with the resonance, drawing a curved trajectory in the air. It looked like dancing steps and a butterfly's flapping wings at the same time. Are you telling me to copy that? The blade of Requiem resonated once again in assertion. Although I'm not sure what that is. Raon nodded and started rotating the rings of fire. The 5 rings of fire resonated to slow down time. The ghastly energy's path grew clearly visible. That is. The path carved by the ghastly energy was a sword dance. The sword dance of fertility that the Siren villagers used to offer to the divine tree Othello. The sword dance of fertility that was supposed to pray for world peace had become a sword dance of revenge and resentment in order to slice the enemy's throat. Die. White light shone from the bishop's hand and sword. A wall full of blades crushed against him. It was the bishop's secret technique, the white spirit wall. Fine. Raon brandished the blade of Requiem. I'll do as you wish. He stomped the ground and used the blazing energy that was burning up from his lower body to rotate his waist. The aura of the 10,000 flames cultivation and the blade of Requiem's ghastly energy mixed into a single energy, tracing through the sword dance's trajectory. Clink! As the blade of Requiem advanced, the amount of energy inside the blade exploded. When Raon finally thrust his sword, a frightening aura stretched from the blade with a thundering sound. Bomb! The mixture of aura and ghastly energy ripped apart the white spirit wall in an instant, rampaging through the bishop and the fanatics behind it. Raon's legs faltered for an instant. It looked like he'd spent too much aura at once as his head went blank. Ha! He caught his breath and slowly raised his head. A bloodstain was the only thing remaining under the subsiding sandy dust. The white blood fanatics, priests, and the bishop had all been erased without a trace. Ha! Raon exclaimed and looked at the blade of Requiem. The red blade had grown even darker after sucking up the bloody energy from the death of white blood fanatics. Your resentment was way stronger than I thought. It was to the point that it would transform the dance of fertility into a dance of revenge. He felt slightly bitter as he turned around. You. Ah. Greer and the knights were falling back with wide eyes. They were opening and closing their mouths like goldfish, too surprised to say anything. Why, young master? Dorian crawled up to him, his limbs trembling as if he had caught a chill. What was that just now? Was it some kind of magic? I wonder. Raon shook off the blood from the blade of Requiem and shook his head. I'm not sure either. He wasn't sure how to describe the dagger that contained a sadness surpassing its power. Chapter 115. Raon narrowed his eyes upon reading the message. Purified bloody energy, ha. It wasn't just bloody energy, but purified bloody energy. It looked like the blade of Requiem ate up the evil energy from the bloody energy and offered him the pure part. It's pure indeed. In fact, the energy had a higher purity than a magic stone's mana. It was an auspicious energy, one that wasn't harmful in any way. I'm taking it in. He lowered the wall of aura blocking it, and the energy offered by the blade of Requiem started seeping into his body. Whir! Pure and clean energy like morning dew started spreading throughout his body. The purified bloody energy is enhancing the body and mind. All stats have increased by 2. Feeling the exhilaration of pure and refreshing energy filling up his body, Raon clenched his fist. However, that message wasn't the last one. Trait adaptation to ghastly energy has been created. A new window appeared, telling him a new trait has been created. Adaptation to ghastly energy, 1 star. Allows the user to control more ghastly energy with a smaller expenditure of aura and willpower upon using ghastly energy with one's body or weapon. Raon's eyes shone upon reading the description. This is pretty good. Wielding the weapon with ghastly energy exhausted a large amount of willpower and aura. Now that he had the trait, he would have more room to spare upon using the blade of Requiem. Wait a moment. While Raon was nodding in satisfaction, Wrath burst in front of him with distorted eyes inside the blue coldness. Why did you just get a new trait? You told me before that the system acts in a way that benefits me. It probably created this trait to help me use the blade of Requiem. And how do you think it created that trait? It's the King of Essence. It's obvious it was taken from the King of Essence's main body. I guess, why are you stating the obvious? Coo. Wrath ground his teeth. Icy anger was crawling up the blue flame. This is really convenient. As Raon was closing the window, the blade of Requiem vibrated slightly. It was a soft movement, as if it was telling him it wanted to get along. Are you hoping to get along in the future? Whir. The blade of Requiem resonated clearly, affirming his statement. You're really helpful, unlike Parasite number 1. I'll cancel your appointment as Parasite number 2. Let's get along. Whir. The blade of Requiem vibrated to express its gratitude. Did you just call the King of Essence Parasite number 1? But you are the parasite. You are the sucker that is sucking me completely dry. I see. Qua. Raon responded insidiously, and Wrath started screaming, bursting in anger and coldness. The blue coldness erupted like a volcano, and the emotion of Wrath swarmed at him. Whir. The emotion of wrath he had taken in before flared up once again and pressured his mind. Huff. It was in extreme pain, one of thousands of needles poking at his pores. Just as he had been getting stronger, Wrath had also been recovering his strength. Raon slowly exhaled and used the Ring of Fire in 10,000 Flames cultivation. Once his soul level increased and heat engulfed his entire body, the pain coming from Wrath's anger and coldness started to subside. This is the counter. The Ring of Fire and the 10,000 Flames cultivation were the only shields to survive against Wrath's blade of coldness and anger. Offer your body and soul to the King of Essence. I won't do that. His hair was standing on end because of the excruciating pain, but he pretended it was nothing as he smiled. Ha! As he was enduring the extreme pain with a cold sweat, the messages appeared. You've endured Wrath's interruption. Strength has increased by 1. Stamina has increased by 1. They were the rewards for enduring Wrath's coldness. Damn it! The King of Essence's stats have been transferred. Again! Wrath jumped up and left Raon's body. He glared at the ridiculous message and ground his teeth. You can't win against me. Raon wiped the sweat from his forehead, pretending to sweep his hair up. I can't be careless around him. Despite his relaxed words, his back was soaked in sweat. Even though he was the giving Wrath, his main body was the monarch of Devildom. He couldn't allow himself to be careless. I thought you were the same at first, but that wasn't the case at all. What are you talking about? The Blade of Requiem is way nicer than you. Raon sneered at Wrath, and wiped the Blade of Requiem clean. It's not nice at all. It's just an insignificant creature that tried to control your body. But it changed its mind. It's different from you, who always tries to swallow me. It's the same. If only it was as strong as the King of Essence, it would have still been targeting you without giving up. Whirr. The Blade of Requiem vibrated its blade in denial. It's telling me to not treat it like you. I'm soon going to destroy that possessed sword along with you. Wrath looked down at the Blade of Requiem, spreading terrifying coldness. It's a good thing for me if you want to raise my stats. You won't have an easy death even if the King of Essence doesn't do anything. You are the type of person who makes enemies everywhere. But you are my only enemy. Raon had another enemy he needed to kill at all costs, but he didn't mention him. Swordsman Raon. As he was about to sheath the Blade of Requiem as he finished cleaning, Greer approached him holding a black wrapping cloth. We managed to survive thanks to you. Thank you once again. His behavior was still not befitting a prince. Raon smiled and lowered his head. No, I'm also thankful to them. That's true indeed. Raon showed him the Blade of Requiem and Greer nodded. I thought it was just emitting a small amount of ghastly energy, but it was beyond my imagination. It was my first time seeing such a weapon. Same goes for me. It bears a stronger resentment than I thought. Are you going to be okay? I heard that a possessed blade can attack its owner. It has completely accepted me as its owner now. I guess it had to be accepted considering your power. It was really amazing. He smiled, saying that he would work even harder in the future to catch up to him. He really was a cool person. I think I can show you, since we are companions now. Greer took out a white bead at the size of a child's head from the black wrapping cloth he brought. Is this? It's the item we took from the White Blood Religion branch. As you already know, the White Blood Religion sucks the blood of half the villagers on the spot and abducts the other half upon attacking a village. We believe that this bead is what allows them to transfer the abducted people to their headquarters. His gaze was full of anticipation as he looked at the bead. Whirr! The Blade of Requiem started vibrating upon hearing from Greer. It looked like it wanted to take revenge and save the people who might be still alive. Raon looked at the Blade of Requiem in admiration. It's amazing. It still wanted to save people despite being a possessed blade now. He could feel the kindness of the Siren villagers. But, young master. Dorian was blankly watching the resonating Blade of Requiem, then started speaking. Where did you learn to handle a dagger? It's my first time seeing you using one, but you are really good at it. Certainly. It was a systematic dagger technique. Greer and the knights also turned to look at him. They were curious about what kind of technique that was, and how he got to learn it. I learned it from Instructor Rimmer. Ah. I see. If it was that person, it makes sense. Dorian, the prince, and the knights accepted it, saying that it wouldn't be surprising if Rimmer knew dagger techniques. This is also pretty useful. Blaming Rimmer was working everywhere. Raon snickered and placed the Blade of Requiem on the back of his waist. The next day at noon. A blue-haired young man was sitting on a thin branch. His eyes were sharp and his mouth was closed shut. He looked like a personification of a pine tree. The man with an aloof atmosphere, resembling a blade, was the third team leader of the Owen Kingdom's Silver Knights and one of the 12 stars of the continent, Kitten. The sight of Raon and Greer reaching the crossroad entered his brown eyes. They said goodbye to each other and parted ways. Boranai's gaze followed Raon's back instead of the third prince that he was supposed to protect. He recognized me for sure. His energy was disheveled for a moment when the white blood fanatics had attacked the third prince's group the day before, and Raon discovered his position without missing that instant. He is amazing. Raon understood he wasn't an enemy and focused on dealing with the white blood religion. His judgment and concentration were similar to a veteran knight that had experienced countless battles. And his dagger techniques were even more amazing. He'd heard from the prince that Raon Sieghart was a sword genius, but he didn't expect him to be proficient with daggers as well. And it wasn't some sloppy dagger technique. The trajectory he drew was extremely adept, as if he'd practiced it thousands, tens of thousands of times. And the last part was a masterpiece. It was an attack performed by condensing the ghastly energy and aura together. Its power and aura were at the level of the highest level of expert. And it was beautiful. The prince and the knights wouldn't have realized it from the scene, but Boranai felt it for sure because he was watching from afar. What Raon Sieghart had performed back then wasn't just a technique. It was a sword dance. It was an art created from a sword. The resentment contained inside the beautiful yet tragic dance made his heart waver for a moment. Raon Sieghart. He didn't really believe it when the third prince called him a true genius, but that was an undeniable fact. The Silver Knights he belonged to were the strongest in the kingdom, no, the strongest in the continent, and yet, he had never witnessed anyone like him before. ManhwaCapped slightly smiled, watching Raon's back as he got further and further away. A new star might be born from Sieghart in a few years. Raon and Dorian traveled for 2 weeks after using the dimensional door to reach the Judean forest, near Haben Castle. They just needed to travel for one more day to reach Haben Castle, which was called one of the Northern Hells. Ugh! Dorian laid down on the portable bed he took from his belly pocket, his teeth chattering. His trembling didn't stop despite the bonfire's heat and the heavy blanket. We are going to die. We are really going to die. We aren't. Raon shook his head while wiping down the blade of Requiem. You just need to do what you can, using what you've learned, to pass this trial. Rimmer wasn't the type of person to make them do what they couldn't. The fact that he sent them there meant that they were capable enough to overcome the trial. Although, what happened with the blood-raving demon was an exception. Do you agree? The blade of Requiem resonated clearly in agreement. He'd become somewhat intimate with him and even Dorian during the last 2 weeks. I know, but I'm scared. I'm just too scared. Dorian placed the lamp glowing in the dark at the head of his bed and went under the blanket. Raon thought it was really extravagant to have a lamp glowing in the dark in a bed while sleeping outside, even though that also allowed him to sleep comfortably. I'm done. Raon unsheathed the blade of Requiem after wiping it clean. It seemed Wrath wasn't satisfied about something as he cleared his throat and came out of the bracelet. Don't you think you are too nice to that insignificant thing nowadays? Too nice? Yes. You are cleaning it every day, and you are also talking to it regularly. Well, it's helping me after all. Even when he said he didn't need it, the blade of Requiem found prey like deer or threats like bandits using its ghastly energy. But you are also able to do that much by yourself. Even so, it's nice of it to do something for me. It was true that his perception was better than the blade's, but he was pretty grateful for doing such things on its own accord. And it's also teaching me how to use ghastly energy. The blade of Requiem taught him the best way to use ghastly energy, and how to get used to it. Since it kept doing good things, it was natural that he would clean it often and talk to it. Using a rubbish power like ghastly energy will only make you look inferior. Even if I look inferior, I need to get stronger. Raon smiled slightly and pushed away Wrath, who was pouting. He wasn't exactly leaving him out, but Wrath was getting more insecure the more he conversed with the blade of Requiem and got intimate with it. The blade of Requiem resonated, as if it was laughing at Wrath. That insignificant creature dares. Stop it. As Wrath was about to crush the blade of Requiem with his coldness, Raon blocked his energy using the 10,000 flames cultivation. Why are you blocking it? Because you are the one who picked the fight first. The King of Essence is the monarch of Devildom. I can't stay still when a mere possessed blade is trying to defy. I'm going to sleep, so be quiet. Coo. Raon forced Wrath back into the bracelet and laid on the portable bed. Feeling the softness of it, he turned around and closed his eyes. As he was breathing slowly to fall asleep, Wrath came back out. He looked slightly dejected, unlike before. Are you sleeping? Not yet. Then. Wrath swallowed his saliva and continued. Do you want to learn how to use frost from the King of Essence? Raon smiled slightly with his back turned to him. After 2 weeks, the monarch of Devildom finally took the bait.